Okay. Hello. Thank you so much for coming back. Thank you so much for your support. This is County Leaks again. I think today I should say Country Leaks. Um, we are happy to have you back again. We apologize for missing 2 weeks. We've gotten your messages to appreciate what we are doing, but also to ask where we've been, and sorry for that. We were working on some logistics. And also Bonnie was traveling, but now it's okay, and I think we will be consistent in our output. So today we are going to talk through 2 areas. One, as usual, it's a follow-up on what has been happening and arising issues. And then the second bit, we are going to look at the incompetence in the national government that is costing taxpayers a significant amount of money. As usual, with me, I have Bonnie. He's the economist. Let me give you something small that you can laugh about. So Bonnie has been doing the research, and then I decided, because we cannot speak about something if I have not researched on it as well. So I started researching on it. So the first time I got the audit documents, I was like, oh shit, where am I going to see this? Where am I looking for this? Where am I finding this? And he had to take me through that, just to say that it's a lot of work to look through the audit reports. It's not an easy task. That he's been doing it over years at his own initiative. I promise you, if you take that document, it is not an easy thing. Or maybe let's assume I'm not as literate, but yeah, I went through that. I appreciated what he's doing. So with us, we have Bonnie. Bonnie, please introduce yourself before we can get to the segment.
Thank you so much. So yeah, Boni Mwangi, I'm a US-based Kenyan economist. I now I think go by the people's auditor, which is a title that I just got not too long ago. So I love doing what I do, and the reason I like to do it is because when you look at what's happening in our country, people are asking why is it that we don't feel like we are moving ahead? We are spending a lot of money in this country. What's happening with the money? So I love spending my time looking at this because I understand that it requires a certain amount of expertise to do this. Definitely requires a lot of time to look at this. So um, you know, I am happy to do it, and it's a pleasure to walk that journey with you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you so much for what you're doing. I think people being aware of what is happening in a level that is easily consumable,
Hmm.
that will more far-reaching as opposed to just the report being as is. And most of the time, it's
Absolutely.
presented to the parliament, so it takes personal initiative for someone to find this
Right.
information. But you go out of your way, you do that. I think that is
It's
a
a
very
pleasure.
good thing for the
It's a
country.
pleasure. It's a
All
pleasure.
right,
Thanks
we
for
go
your
to
time
the
too.
first. Thank you so much. We
Hmm.
go to the first segment, and it's a follow up on what has been happening for the previous week, whatever came up. The
Hmm.
first issue was on, you saw the Senate was having a sitting as- with Governor Sakaja. Like
Right.
I'm happy that I'm like, do we need to give people titles because they deserve it, or do we need to give people titles just because they're in those positions and they call themselves that? Okay, so they had us
Yeah.
sitting with the Sakaja. And what
Hmm.
was question was about 68 million. I hope I'm right on that figure. If I'm wrong, just
Right.
bear with me. About
Hmm.
68 million is being lost in transaction fee, but
Hmm.
on banks. And this was what was being questioned was cooperative banks specifically.
Hmm.
And what came up was um, that the bank was charging 70 shillings per each
Hmm.
transaction.
Right.
I have looked at all my bank transactions.
Hmm.
Me, as an individual who does not have voluminous work for the bank,
Right.
most of fees range between 30 to that
Hmm.
70. But even that
Right.
70, it depends with the transaction amount. And of course, it depends with what kind of transaction that is. It can't be all of it. If it's mobile banking, it has to be lesser.
Right. Right.
If the amount is higher, it has to be higher. I do not
Hmm.
understand how accounting
Mm-hmm.
First, when he was asked about it,
Mm-hmm.
he was as surprised as we are that that
Right.
is what we're charging. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
what that spoke to is that they did not enter into an agreement with the bank to
Mm-hmm.
pre on the fee,
Right.
which is very, very wrong. You cannot give the bank liberty to decide, or any other party that you're subcontracting, liberty to
Mm-hmm.
decide what I'm going to charge you. And then the
Yeah.
second thing came out to me clearly was probably it was not a competitive bid. Because
Mm-hmm.
if it was a competitive bid, you would have gotten bids from different banks
Yes.
and you would
Yes.
have realized, okay, this is costly, this is cheaper,
Mm-hmm.
let's do
Right.
this. So that you're surprised as we are, and the best you're saying is, oh, we've lodged a dispute. And the
Yeah.
last communication in regards to that dispute was December last year. I mean,
Right.
incompetency that we are going to speak about in national government, I will say this is what is happening here. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, let me just say that this is so today's topic is incompetence in government. And I don't know that you can get it's obviously today we are focusing on the national government, but I can tell you that if you ever wanted to understand what incompetence looks like and the
Yes,
price that citizens pay for incompetence in government, all you have to do is look at what's happening in Nairobi. So the
yes,
issue that you're talking about, if you just look at Governor Sakaja at the Senate, he is sitting there like a little boy who's surprised at these questions. And the best that he can do is say that we've lodged a complaint. I mean, you are the executive of a county government. You are supposed to know everything that's happening in government in your under your control. You're supposed to be involved in decision making. You're supposed to be making sure that you are prudent in how you manage the people's resources. You are sitting there losing 70% of every single shilling, and all you can tell the people is that we've lodged a complaint. You know, first of all, it shows that you don't even know what's happening under you. You are
yes.
surprised
Mm,
by this, and when you are someone to show up is when you come up with an excuse saying we've lodged. I mean, the city of Nairobi has 16,000 employees. Okay, 16,000 employees. The starting from the bottom, starting from the people that are sweeping floors and washing washrooms in the county of Nairobi, could have come up with
yes,
that excuse. You know, and this is, we spent a lot of time talking about the danger and the problems that we create for ourselves when we elect people that are not competent. I'm not talking about
yes,
people's politics. I'm talking about their competence in terms of, just making good decisions that are not hurting people. So you have a gentleman like that there who clearly does not understand what's happening under him. And
yes,
this is just a small example. In the last section, we talked about the issue of pending bills. So
yes,
you're talking about a country that has 118 billion in pending bills. And out of these pending bills is 21,000 in legal bills. Okay. So
yes,
imagine a county that has a budget of about 300 million every year for a county attorney, but has 21,000 billion in pending bills, and
yes,
6.3 billion of those is owed to four lawyers. And the auditor tells us that this 6.3 billion owed to four lawyers is a result of incompetence, is a result of
yes,
corruption and illegalities. So this is the
yes,
price. So this issue that we're talking about, the 68 million, it's a small example of the extent of
yes,
incompetence across government, and in this case, obviously, we're talking about Nairobi, but it's
yes,
across the board. It's across the board. It's
yes,
painful because, again, Nairobi has a lot of people that live in it. These 33 billion, in terms of the annual budget is supposed to take care of things like infrastructure, make sure that people
yes,
have water, make sure that, streets are clean, you're collecting garbage, make sure that we don't have
yes.
potholes. But when you start off by losing 6.3 billion to four lawyers because of incompetence, even before we bring anything else, it's very hard to recover from that. And so you imagine doing
Yes,
that over a 5-year term, it is almost impossible to imagine a scenario where Nairobi catches up.
yes. And I would like to point out that this is only one bank.
Hmm.
Probably if we picked documents and analyzed
Yes,
with other banks, we might have similar expenses or more.
right.
And
Yes,
just for people to understand the value of 68 million in Isiolo, the county that we
hmm,
looked at last time,
right.
bursary that was dispersed to schools. Of course,
Right.
whatever was allocated in the budget was about
Hmm.
70 million, but whatever
Yes.
was disbursed to the schools was about
Hmm.
35 million. If you're losing
Right.
68 million, that is more than the amount that was paid as bursary in Isiolo
Right.
County. Really, there is so much more. Sometimes we've gotten to the point so much is being stolen that we are not
Yeah.
understanding the value of money. But I would like for
Right.
people to look at it, think how much how much of a difference 68 million would make in terms of paying school fees for people who are not able.
You know what? That's a very good point that you made because, you and I spend a lot of time looking at this and, obviously we report the facts as we see it, but there's a
Mm.
tendency or there's a likelihood that when people keep hearing these numbers that
Yes.
they stop, it's, I think it's normal as a human being to kind of say, you know
Yes.
what, I don't want to, I don't want to think too much about it. And so we start seeing as normal, right? The level of criminality that we're seeing, which is not. I mean, obviously, I tell people, I do this because I care about the human toll, the people that are behind this. When the county of Nairobi is losing 6.3 billion in legal bills, there are people who are never going to be able to get an education because of that.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
literally people that are sitting in emergency rooms right now that are not going to get the help that they need. People have cancer,
Yes.
people have different things, and you're going to a government hospital, and the only reason why you're not able to get help and probably survive is because of decisions that have been made by people that have the ability to make this decision on behalf of everybody. And that's why we do this because we want to make sure that people know that decisions that are made by these people can
And
advance the welfare of everybody and can hurt that.
yeah, that is, I
Yeah,
agree with you fully. It's important for
right.
us to continue speaking on this so that people can be aware what is being taken away from them by just silly decisions as simple as not being keen on what is being charged as transaction fees. The next
Absolutely.
point that I want to touch on,
Hmm.
the Auditor-General spoke about this last week, I believe, or the week before,
Right.
and she highlighted and said, we present these audit reports every other time. But then
Right.
even in the findings, you would realize there are recurrent,
Hmm.
how to say, recurrent non-compliances. Whatever happened
Right.
last year, it happened
Yeah.
this year, and even in a bigger magnitude compared to what happened last year. So,
Right.
and her plan was we need to come up with a way that we
Hmm.
ensure uh, are punished so that there is no repetition. Of course, we
Yeah.
know we have the relevant institutions in place, but
Right.
for whatever reasons, not working. And I wanted to do a comparison with some of the other countries just to
Hmm.
show how serious people take their audit reports in comparison
Right.
to us.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
we'll start with South Korea. So South
Right.
Korea, if an audit report finds that you've committed something wrongful in terms of public expenditure, so
Hmm.
one thing that they will do, there will be mandatory recovery from
Hmm.
the officer responsible or the accounting
Okay.
officer. So if it's a
Right.
county, in this case,
Hmm.
60 million,
Hmm.
Ninja will pay it because it's
Hmm.
accounting officer. If they cannot, it's the people who entered into that contract, which still it's him because it's the accounting officer. And
Right.
then the applicable persons, they lose their pension. So that amount is deducted from, because someone can say they do not have enough money right now, so they cannot pay for that.
Right.
That amount is deducted from their
Hmm.
pension. And
Right.
there is immediate commencement of
Hmm.
prosecution. So
Right.
EACC is taking that, I'm guessing their EACC, immediate prosecution commences right away. That is South
Right.
Korea. In New Zealand, they
Hmm.
say in 30 days, within 30 days,
Hmm.
they're supposed to, like, research is supposed to be done.
Yes.
They identify between 30 to 60 days, sorry. They identify the
Mm.
person who's culpable and then
Hmm.
the person is prosecuted. That is in
Right.
New Zealand.
Hmm.
And then finally in Singapore, our Singapore that we speak about
Yeah.
every time and we want to be. In
Right.
Singapore, the officer in charge or the
Hmm.
accounting officer must refund the amount. They treat it as a personal debt.
Right.
So they treat as you're the one who took the amount and it's a personal debt and you must
Hmm.
refund it. And
Yeah.
then repeat offenders are banned from public office.
Right.
For me, I am big on banning from public office.
Right.
People will come and say they take that money, they take it to wherever, to whichever countries. But if we get to the point where we are banning them from public office, I feel
Hmm.
like now we are going to have fresher blood,
Yeah.
and then maybe the recurrent and just wrongful acts will not be as many. Your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, the one thing that I think as I listen to you, all these countries that you're mentioning, you're talking about countries where people take seriously, number one, being in public service. If you look at
Yes.
this country that you mentioned, many of them, you've seen prime ministers and presidents resign from office because
Yeah.
they maybe tried to sell a budget to the public and parliament, and they did not get approval, and that is shameful enough for
Yes.
them to say, "I've lost the country. I'm going to resign." Right? So you're talking about countries where people, particularly people in office, care about, they have
Yes.
integrity, that they don't try to rule just because because they can, right? That they try to make sure that whatever they do has the support of the parliament, has the support of the people. That's
Mm,
not what we have. I mean, to be honest with you, what we're
mm,
witnessing in our country is total failure of government, total failure of government,
mm,
total failure of accountability. So I want to go back to the issue of we're talking about Sakaja. The idea that the city of Nairobi, which has over 100 MCAs, okay, that are costing the county of Nairobi at least 10% of the budget every single year. Okay.
mm,
These are the people that are supposed to tell Governor Sakaja when Governor Sakaja decides to spend 55% of the revenue in
mm,
that county, which is basically stealing from people in Dandora, people in Isili, people that need roads,
mm,
people that need services.
mm,
When the governor
mm,
breaks the law and spends 55% of
mm.
the budget, you expect these people that are in the county assembly to say, no, you're not going to do that, because when you do that, that means
Yes.
that my road that's in my ward is not going to be,
Yes.
functioning, right? We need water, and other
Yes.
infrastructure. When you spend 55% illegally by that, because the law is clear, the maximum limit is 35%. You never hear from any of these people. The people that go out and you
Mm,
see them on media criticizing Governor Sakaja, it's never about what's happening. It's usually about their interpersonal issues, right? So again, what is the point of having over 100 MCAs in the county of Nairobi when Governor Sakaja, or any other governor for that matter, is able to spend 55% of the budget stealing from average citizens? What is the point of
mm.
having over 100 MCAs when a county has 118 billion shillings in pending bills? When the
Yes.
city, the city government is owing 6.3 billion to four lawyers, when it has a county attorney's office where the budget is about 300 million. What is the point of that? You know? So,
Yes.
and again, so you have a government official or governor show up in at the Senate. But to me,
Mm,
um, showing up at the Senate, to me, is nonsense, because there's never anything that comes out of it. We've seen even worse videos where, the governor of Kirinyaga shows up there and she's being asked about spending 10 million on, or I think it was 4 million on breakfast. So some of this, when you see that 20-second or 30-second video, they go viral, um,
yes.
but I don't think that anybody takes that seriously. So again, in my view, what we have in our country is total failure of government and total failure of
Yes.
accountability. There's no reason why any of this stuff, the stuff that we're going to be talking about, should be happening in a country where people, and again, we have a lot of politicians. If these politicians took seriously their job in terms of oversight, we wouldn't be here.
That is true. That is true.
Hmm.
And so that we do not, because the best, like you've said, that comes out of this is an inquiry where they tape some
Right.
parts to excite the
Yes.
public,
Hmm.
or the rest, the Senate tweets like the rest of us, Parliament tweets like the rest of
Yeah.
us, and
Right.
ESCC, you see them being quiet during that season, and then maybe
Yeah.
when we ask them, you will see
Hmm.
them going for someone who has stolen 200,000 in Kakamega. That's the best that will
Exactly.
come out of them. So that we are
Yeah.
not like them, I think we
Hmm.
we also need, because laws stem from parliament, but part of it, I
Right.
think, when you speak about it as a
Right.
public and you write to parliament, then
Right.
that can possibly be the basis of a law coming up. So I am thinking at
Right.
this point, one of the
Hmm.
areas that we should maybe think about is what really can be done
Right.
when there is repetitive or just not even
Yeah.
repetitive, because what someone
Yeah.
can still once in
Right.
millions,
Yeah.
but what
Yeah.
will come out of an audit report. I think it's important for us to have some legislation in regards to that, because the SEC is not
Yeah.
doing whatever they're supposed
I agree with
to.
that
All
100%.
right.
I think we need direct consequences so that, so that, I mean, our
Yes.
laws have to stand for something. The point of having these laws, these guardrails,
Yes.
is to make sure that people don't misbehave. This law that I'm talking about, that
Yes.
caps limit on salaries, for example, at 35%. That law is supposed to say to make sure that the vast majority of the money that goes to counties go to serve people, goes to build that hospital that's needed, goes to build that road. But when people decide that they're not going to care, and again, 90% of our counties don't care about that particular law. And the 90% that are
Mm.
violating that law don't violate by 1 or 2%. They violate by on average 9%. You're talking about Nairobi violating,
Yes.
spending 55% when the legal limit is 35%. You're talking about a place like my Kiambu County, my home county of Kiambu. In the first year of Governor Mutang, he spent 65% of the budget uh, on salaries against the legal limit
Mm.
of 35%. So, it says everything to know about the attitude of the people that are in government. When people know that there is no consequences, right? Then
That is true.
nobody cares about it. Nobody cares about it. And the people that hurt and the people that pay the price are the most vulnerable people that need people in government to
Yes.
behave and to be
Mhm.
cautious about how they conduct themselves around taxpayers' resources.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it ought to stop being a suggestion document, and
absolutely.
the relevant institutions need to act on
Hmm.
it. And if there's a gap which is making the institutions not act on it, I think we should identify it and petition to have some legislation drafted in regards to that. So we go to
Agreed.
our segment today, and for the previous episodes, we've been doing county leads. We wanted to have an interlude because the intent basically is just to cover all the wrongful expenditures in the country in entirety
Hmm.
from the different arms of government. So today
Yeah.
we wanted to bring in some interlude, and we are touching on um, just acts by the national government, different arms of the national government, like even different organizations in the national government, like parastatals.
Hmm.
They're acts that actually results, and it's out of incompetency, it's out of negligence, but eventually it results to loss of money to taxpayers.
Right.
So you engage yourself as a parastatal, and because
Hmm.
maybe you do not monitor the contract as required, maybe you do not engage in the rightful bidding process, procurement process, I mean,
Right.
um,
Hmm.
or maybe you not use the loan as you're supposed or when you're
Hmm.
supposed to, and then now the public ends up paying monies for things that they cannot point to and say, oh, this is where this money went to, this is where this money went to. So we are going to look at a couple of areas. We will do this in 2 episodes. We are going to look at a couple of areas today, and then in the subsequent episode, we'll look at the remainder of the areas. But basically, in total, the total amount lost is about 2 billion. I mean, 250 billion. I am sorry. I'm sorry.
251 billion.
250, yeah, 251 billion. Um, and it's just, you will see it's just incompetency and negligence that has made us spend extra money on that. So we are going to look one at wasteful interest charges. We will talk through the areas, so I'm just highlighting them. And then the next area will be avoidable commitment fees, and this relates to loan agreements. And then illegal contract variations. And,
Hmm.
and this speaks to contract variation that exceeds the amount stipulated under the law. And then we are looking at stalled projects and pending bills. And this relates also to just wasteful interest and charges. So significantly, you will notice that the amount of money that is being wasted in this area truthfully totals to that. And it's something that if we were diligent and a bit more responsible in what we were supposed
Mm-hmm.
to do as public servants, then that amount would not be lost. So on the first area, Bonnie,
Mm-hmm.
we are going to look at wasteful spending, and
Yeah.
that relates to interest and
Mm-hmm.
commitment fee.
Yeah.
Um, and um, basically, like I've said before, you will not see a road, or you will see an incomplete road. You will not
Yeah.
see a classroom,
Mm-hmm.
but you will see that you need to pay a certain amount of money just
Right.
because the relevant ministry or the relevant organization did not do what they are supposed to do. And if I'm wrong, correct me in this. The
Mm-hmm.
total amount on West interest is about 4.75 billion. And then the
Right.
total amount in commitment fee is about 1.5 billion. And the
Right.
projects that I can just write, and you will speak to it some more, is like
Mm-hmm.
the Mombasa Mariakan Highway, which was done by
Right.
Kenha. Um,
Yeah.
they incurred about 35 million in commitment
Mm-hmm.
fee be-
Right.
because the loan was disbursed on time. And
Right.
what they would attribute to is things like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it took a while longer to finish what is it, purchase of rights of way for them to do construction. And then
Right.
if you go to areas like Southern Kenol, Sagana Marua, equally they
Mm-hmm.
incurred about 24,992, 420, basically that as
Yeah.
commitment fee for delay
Yeah.
in usage of the loan. And
Right.
then finally, I will point to Kisii,
Mm-hmm.
not the Kisii one, the Bagamoyo, Hororo,
Mm-hmm.
and sewage system, where
Right.
about 1.5 billion, not
Yeah.
million,
Yeah.
1.5 billion was paid commitment fee
Mm-hmm.
because that money was
Yeah.
never used. So
Yeah.
basically, just before coming to speak on commitment fee, you
Mm-hmm.
get into a loan,
Mm-hmm.
and the requirement is you're supposed to use that amount,
Yeah.
and you're supposed to use by a certain time.
Right.
If you do not use amount or use that
Mm.
amount by a certain time, then you're
Right.
going to incur certain charges. So, and
Yeah.
that is what we are calling commitment fees, and that is
Mm-hmm.
what Kenya has been paying significantly. And
Right.
if you look at the other amount, which is interest on delayed payments, you
Right.
subcontract someone, you are
Mm-hmm.
supposed to pay them by a certain period, let's say 30 days after they've submitted their invoice or completed the
Right.
works, but you do
Mm-hmm.
not pay within that period, and then they
Yeah.
charge interest.
Right.
So please, Bonnie,
So
speak to that.
yeah. So I mean, look. Let me start off by saying that um, you know, everybody knows. I talked about. We talk about the issue of corruption. I think everyone understands the danger that is corruption to our country, and people know that.
Yes.
Although we have a government right now, in my view, that is not serious about tackling corruption, even though we know that we need to fight it. Generally speaking, citizens do have a recourse when corruption takes place. Maybe in the future we'll have a government that takes that seriously, and we can take people to court. There's hope that maybe we can
Mm,
recover some of these losses. The problem with incompetence is that there's no
yes.
recourse for it, right? So some of the stuff that you're gonna hear today, it is painful because you know that it would not have happened if it wasn't for incompetence, and yet citizens have no recourse, right? So when you
Yes.
hear I mean, we've been talking about in this country of wanting to be Singapore. We've been talking about, the president is telling us that he needs 4.5 trillion to move Kenya to Singapore, right? So you look at what a country like Singapore did to be able to become what it is. Singapore didn't become Singapore by wishing. Singapore did certain things that made sure that it became Singapore. And one of those things is to treat
Yes.
the taxpayer resources seriously, to be prudent in
Yes.
terms of how you use those resources, to make sure that you don't waste resources, to treat
Yes.
every bit of currency that you have as if it was the last one that you have, right? That's what
Mm,
Singapore did to
mm,
be able to get to where it got. So when we are talking about what's
Mm.
happening today, and I just want to mention some of these examples of pure incompetent. In other words, if we didn't have people that are incompetent in government, we will not be incurring those losses. And so, as I give you some of these examples, I want people to think about, last month and a half or so, I was talking about this kid from my home county of Kiambu who stayed home because he could not get 100,000 that he needed to be able to report to Egerton for school, right? 20-year-old kid, he needs 100,000 to be able to realize his dream, 100,000 a year. Okay, so I want Kenyans to think about
Mm.
Owen, who needs 100,000. As I give you these examples, I want you to imagine how many people that we are talking about, right? That could be
Yes.
served if we didn't have incompetence. So
Mm.
the for example, the Kenya National Highway Authority, which is supposed to be the engine for growth, it's supposed to be the one of the departments that is really investing or helping Kenya achieve, developed infrastructure when it comes to, roads. But you have
Yes.
that agency issue a contract to someone. The contractor does his job. When it's time to pay the bill, we get the bill, but we don't pay it on time. So this is just pure incompetence. The bill is sent to us. The contractor has performed their job pursuant to the contract. We don't pay, and because of incompetence in managing a contract, the contractor adds 1.2 billion on top of the invoice to us because of
Mm.
incompetence. So we end up losing as a country 1.2 billion. So I want you to imagine how many Owens could have been sent to school if we saved 1.2 billion that we did not have to lose there, right? So just
Mhm.
one example, and these
Yes.
examples that I'm going to give you, they are all in the same year. Okay, so the same department, we have another contract that we give someone. They perform their job. We don't pay on time, and we are hit with
Yes.
756 million in interest. Interest.
Wow.
So the same department, we give someone a contract. We are supposed to do certain things to make sure that when the contractor is supposed to start working, that they don't have any delays. But because we're incompetent, we have not done that. And so what happens is that
Yes.
the contractor charges fees, charges interest, and all of a sudden, a contract that was supposed to cost 5.2 billion has gone up to 6.2 billion. We've lost 1 billion. Okay. Another contract
Yes.
that we give someone, they perform their job, they send us an invoice. Because of incompetence, we don't pay the bill, we lose
Mm-hmm.
615 million in interest. All
Mm.
these examples that I'm giving you are individual incidences in specific contracts. So I want you to start thinking about the people that are running KENHA, this Kenya National Highway Authority Agency. And particularly if you're from the private sector, I want you to imagine where you are and ask yourself if you did stuff like this, where your boss notices that because of incompetence, we have lost 1.2 billion in interest. You have another example where we've lost 756 million in interest. You have another example where we've lost 615 million in interest. And I'm gonna give you another one here where we give a contract to somebody for 3.2 billion. They perform their job, send an invoice, we don't pay, and all of a sudden we have 656 million, sorry, 657 million in interest added on top of the 3.2 billion. Give you another one because they don't stop. It's just everywhere. This is another
Mm.
example here where, I mean, you know, I don't even think we have enough time. So in this particular example here, we lose 543 million plus another
Mm.
70 million in interest. So, I mean,
Mm.
this department, because I was interested to know what's happening in this department, had, I think, the total amount that was spent on infrastructure across the country was 80 billion. 80 billion is how much we said we
Mm-hmm.
spent on infrastructure. Uh, that
Yes.
that involves labor, that involves buying materials, that involves so many things. So when you've lost almost 5 billion in just a few examples in terms of interest, I mean, do
Yes.
you see why Kenyans are hearing that we are taking on, trillions of shillings in interest, not interest, not just interest, but debt service every year, and yet we don't see
Yeah.
the results in terms of development. This is what's happening because you have a department that has a budget, a big budget, but when you really chase down and see what's happening, there is nothing to show for it. Before I forget,
Mm.
I want to mention another department, the Department of the Ministry of Health. So the Ministry of Health last year had a budget of 130 billion. Okay, this is 2023,
Mm.
2024. Our country that year had a budget of 3.8 trillion. So out of that 3.8 trillion, we spent 130 billion, which is a very small number. If you just take 130 billion divided by
Mm.
3.8, very small number in terms of
Mm.
healthcare. That's what we devoted to healthcare. Why did we spend so little in healthcare? The reason why we spent so little in healthcare is because we spent 1.6 trillion in debt service. This is mostly interest, some principal payment, but we are spending 1.6 trillion, which was over 40 something percent of the budget and over 65% of the
Yes.
money that we made as a country on debt service. So we spent that much. Then
Yes.
when I look at the details of this 130, I find out that in that year we lost 8.2 billion in interest on legal bills, okay, in this department, the Ministry of
Wow.
Health. So a ministry that has 130 billion in budget ended up losing 8.2 billion on interest alone on legal bills. So what you have to ask yourself is if out of 130 billion is 8.2 billion interest, what was the amount that related to legal bills? And so when you come up with that number, let's say that the interest is 10%, right? So if we are paying 8.2
Mm.
billion in illegal bills, I mean, in interest, you can see how much the legal bill will be, right? Even if it's 5%. So the point is that when you look at many of these budgets, the amount that the government is still spending ends up to be nowhere near what's actually spent because we lose a lot of money on incompetence. So the same time that you hear this, you find out that, for example, at the Mathare Hospital, citizens are having to spend beds. I mean, sorry, to spend nights lying on the floor and sharing beds with strangers because our country lacks the ability to have beds for everybody, because our country does not have enough money,
Yes.
apparently, to build hospitals for everybody. So, in one instance, the same department that's supposed to provide beds for everybody doesn't have the ability to do that, but we've lost 8.2 billion. Incompetence. This is the price of incompetence.
8 point in income.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think what and I don't even know where to start because if you think about 8.3 again now that I'm looking
Yeah.
through the counties and I understand how much it
Hmm.
costs per each component, you get to understand this money could have
Yeah.
actually been put into a better use. And
Let me surprise
just
you.
I'm one to do
Yeah.
comparison. So I
Yeah.
do contract drafting for a
Hmm.
living, contract drafting
Yeah.
and management for a living. Uh-huh. Go on.
Yeah. Now I wanted to surprise Kenyans because yeah, I want to put into
Yes.
context what this means. So this 8.2 billion that I'm talking about, that the
Yes.
Department of Health, our Minister of Health lost in interest alone, was more money than the entire counties, the 47 counties that we have in our country. This 8.2 billion was more money than the entire 47 counties spent on bursaries in the entire year. Okay, that 8.2 billion was more money than all the 47 counties spent on support to hospitals. So when county governments provide support to hospitals, they are required to indicate what those amounts are. So
Mm.
last year, in 2023,
Mm.
2024, our 47 counties
Mm.
provided 5.2 billion to local hospitals. So 5.2 billion is what all the
Mm.
47 counties combined gave to local hospitals, and yet our Department of Health has lost 8.2 billion in interest alone in 1 year. You know, so it doesn't make any sense. There's no way to rationalize what's happening. It's just pure incompetence.
No, there isn't. There
Yeah.
isn't. And I was just saying, like I do contract drafting management for a
Hmm.
living. And
Yeah.
one of the key areas that I anticipate, of course, you have to anticipate all the risks.
Right.
It's not the first time that Kenya is building a road. Last year was not the first time. They've been doing
Right.
it years back from their
Yeah.
inception. So it
Right.
means some of the challenges they expect to come across when they are doing the construction is that
Yeah.
they're going to have delays in land procurement. So
Right.
before you engage someone and say you're going to step into the site at this date,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you ought to anticipate that you either have an acquisition like land rights to all of the land
Right.
parcels that you will require, or
Mm-hmm.
you are on course to getting them and you will get them by the time they step into the site. And that is why there's something
Right.
called condition precedent. Before
Right.
someone steps into the site, whatever
Yeah.
obligation it is that you're supposed to do, you do it so that when they get into the site, they
Right.
perform the tasks within the stipulated timelines and they are not
Right.
delayed because of action. So I do
Yeah.
not understand how such contracts are structured, not having that in mind. And these are
Yeah.
entities that have been in operations from way
Right.
back. And not even
Mm-hmm.
that only in regards to
Mm-hmm.
loan agreements, because now we lose money in commitment fee again.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
looking at um, before even we go to the commitment fee, delay in
Right.
payment. And I think you and I had a
Mm-hmm.
chat about this before. How countries
Yeah.
like Japan, how countries
Mm-hmm.
like the US, they have
Mm-hmm.
put a credit period on all their payments.
Yeah.
If you subcontract someone and they do something for the national government or the
Right.
state,
Right.
you are
Yeah.
supposed to pay within a stipulated period, say 30 days
Yeah.
to 60 days. And the
Right.
reason for that is to ensure, of course, those people, those businesses remain viable. But even you
Right.
as a national government,
Yeah.
you must be able to pay whatever you're committing to. So I am
Right.
questioning our government. I'm like, you're delaying in payment. Did you not know that you're going to incur this expense? Um, did you take that money and put it into something else which speaks to your incompetence?
Mm-hmm.
Did you not have this money all together and it was vibes
Yeah.
and inshallah? Like,
Yeah.
how do you get to a point where you delay in payment and the amount you're going to owe as a result of the delay in payment
Right.
runs
Yeah.
billions? It just does not make sense.
It's you and I will have a very hard time trying to make sense of it because you're someone who came up in the private sector where you're held accountable, right? There's nothing, look, uh, everything that happens under my watch, in terms of my professional responsibilities, I'm held account to that, right? So if I lose $1, I have to be able to explain why I lost it. If I spend $1, I have to be able to explain why that happened. If I achieve lower profitability on my engagements relative to what I did last year, I have to be able to come up with an with a reason for that. And I think about that before
Yes.
I'm even asked because I take that seriously for myself. If you're gonna be a leader, you need to be able to articulate and be able to defend what's happening under your watch. And so when Kenyans look at something like this, Kenyans are
Yes.
complaining about going to hospitals and being told that they need to pay fees where they,
Yes.
where they don't need to pay. Kenyans are showing up to hospital. I was talking to one gentleman today that I just ran into, young kid, and I see that he has a skin infection. So I asked him, what's going on, and he's walking around, and you can tell that he's kind of ashamed of what's happening. And I asked him, what's going on with you? Have you gone to a hospital? And he told me he went to a county government hospital here in Kiambu County and did not get help. Did not get help. So he ended up going to a private hospital where he got some help, but he needs to buy
Mm.
medication. He doesn't have all the money. So you think about this kid who's about 24 years old, who is working and paying taxes, who goes to a county hospital and is not helped, and then you're seeing our own government lose billions upon billions and billions of interest on nonsense instead of serving people like that. And Kenyans don't ask for miracles. Kenyans understand that the government is not the answer for everything, but they do expect competency. They do expect competency. When people are running around asking to be elected to office, they are telling us that they're competent. They are telling us they're going to protect us. But oftentimes, when you watch what they are doing, you see that they don't know the first thing about prudence. They don't know the first thing about treating every last shilling as though it was the last. That's what citizens are mostly frustrated about, is that, we are suffering, and then we are looking at you and the way you're conducting yourself around these resources, and we cannot connect the two.
We wait on Bonnie. All right. As we wait, I wanted just to compare with other countries how differently they approach this matter. South Korea, same as Japan and the US, there is a credit period allocated and payment ought to be made within a certain period. For South Korea, it's 30 days. Um, and then in case there is delays, there will be a personal surcharge on the officer. So if an officer is responsible for making the payment and then they're delaying, then there is personal surcharge on them. And I think this personal accountability concept is what Kenya ought to embrace very much. And then in countries like Singapore, dear Singapore, there is a payment requirement period, seems to be lesser than South Korea. And then if there is a delay in payment, the officer responsible is fined. And of course, the vendor is paid interest. So we don't like the interest part, but also I think the fining part would ensure the person responsible does it on time. And then finally, a country like New Zealand, uh, it is a requirement that ministries must absorb loans on schedule. And if there is delay, then Parliament cuts their budget. So I think that is the concept we ought to adopt, especially on those commitment fee issues. I think the budget should be cut in the event there is a delay in usage of the funds. And then, did I say finally before? Final? um, in India, there is a credit period. And then if the credit period is exceeded, interest is paid from that respective institution on or ministry's budget, not taxpayers. So I think it has a similar approach as cuts on budgets, because if you're eating into your budget, then ultimately you do not have extra amount to spend on whatever. So this is a form of personal liability, but on the respective ministry or the respective parastatal, which is a good thing. All right. The next session we are going to go to is stalled projects. Basically, Kenya is well known for launching projects that they have no absolute intent of completing them. And in this area, we've lost about 14 billion, is it? 14 billion. So we advertised in the newspaper. You saw whatever happened with Rironi and other projects that have been coming up of late. We advertised in the paper. We go to social media. We speak about it. We engage people on the ground. Every other person, we take per diems, we take choppers. We fly to the place. We go cut a ribbon. We put a few tractors. I don't know what vehicles they're called. We've put a few tractors on site and those excavators. And then we pretend it's all merry. After a week, after 2 months, after a year, we vacate the site and nothing happens. And the unfortunate thing is, if that happened without any form of payment, then that will be okay. But unfortunately, we pay the contractors a certain amount of money. And then whether the delays are from the government side or from the contractor's side, at some point, the project is just abandoned and the amount that has been paid is not recovered. I would assume there's contention to the recovery because it depends with who caused the stalling of the project. But then again, what comes out clearly to me is contract management. That is one thing. I think we really ought to work on contract management as a government, because you cannot be getting into, like I said before, contracts is what I do every day.
Right.
And every time I structure the contract, if we're going to make payment to any person, I ensure our risk exposure is very minimal comparatively to the amount of money we are paying.
Right.
And if any person is going to abandon the project, the liability exposure for them will be sufficient to complete the project.
Right.
And of course, a private entity, which is something the government should embrace, you
Right.
should not into a project, one, if you do not know where your money is going to come from.
Right.
Two, you've not fulfilled the obligations that you, the government entity, is supposed to do so that the
Right.
counter can perform after you. Because the
Yeah.
moment you fail in performing those obligations, then that party has a right not to continue performing, and you
Yeah.
cannot claim damages sufficient to finish the project if the failure to complete is from your side. So
Yeah.
contract management is something that the government needs to focus on. I'm just going to point to projects and you can
Hmm.
speak on to more.
Right.
Um, One is from the Ministry of Interior.
Hmm.
So what happened in this case, that is Shimolatewa Prison.
Hmm.
The contract value was about 45.85 million.
Right.
Um, the work stalled,
Hmm.
and then as a result of heavy rains,
Hmm.
the wall collapsed in 2023. The
Right.
contractor vacated the site, but by the
Hmm.
time they were vacating the site, they had been paid 22 point something million. So
Right.
nothing came of that, just
Yeah.
ukuta ambayo imeoshwa na mvua, and
Right.
we paid 2.36 million. And
Hmm.
if you look at the project for that, the prison projects,
Hmm.
the total runs to about 228 million stalled
Right.
projects for prison projects.
Right.
And that is not just, it's just but one of the projects. There are some from the police service, and I think you can speak into more others. But if you look at
Yeah.
this, it's 228 million. Again,
Right.
I am here to remind people in Nairobi, the bursary allocated for the last financial year
Hmm.
for students was
Hmm.
around 300 million. I might miss it by a few millions, but it was around 300 million. If
Yeah.
we are losing about 200 million, it
Yeah.
means that is almost three-quarters of that bursary amount that
Yeah.
we've lost. Installed projects that you cannot use, you cannot break and use the spare parts, or like it's just lost money that we can do nothing with. And
Right.
really we ought to do better. Please just touch on a few more projects,
Yeah. Yeah.
and speak to the whole issue.
So the example you're giving is perfect because, I want Kenyans to think about this. When you talk about money being wasted in one department,
Mm,
that impacts the ability of the government to serve citizens in other departments. So if we are losing a lot of money on projects, that means that money that should have been there to build a hospital, to build a road, to send Owen or any other kid to school is not there. And so, there are real implications, because of this incompetence. So the amount that you're talking about is Nairobi County spent about 670 million in bursaries in 2023-24, but they could not account for about 301 million. So the amount that they spend is the 300 and something that you're talking about, right? So this, the
yes.
analysis that you and I are talking about here gives us about 27 billion in stalled projects. This is disaster on a number of levels. So let's just talk about, for example, the fact that our country is spending 75% of our revenue as a country on debt service. So we are spending 75% of every single shilling that we have on debt service. So I want you to think about this 27 billion.
Yes.
Because our country has been running on deficits every single year for 11 years straight, um, we can establish
Mm,
that much of this money, this 27 billion that we are talking about, has been borrowed. It has been borrowed. So we go out and we borrow 27 billion. And we go out and issue contracts, and some of these contracts have been there since 2015, 2016. So we have contracts that have been there for close to 10 years, for which we are paying interest every single year. And those contracts are not
yes.
serving anybody. Because if you go out and you issue, for example, we have 21 billion in a contract that we gave to, there was a project where um, we wanted to modernize certain infrastructure. We go out, the contract is issued, we pay out the money, and then nobody, the project basically stalls, nothing is happening to it. We go out, there's a lot of projects here involving the prison system where, we had 38 prison projects where we wanted to modernize prisons. Those contracts are issued, we take the money, 570
Mm,
million, the project stall. So when the project stalls, just think about this, the chain of this disaster. We've borrowed and I'm just going to use this one
Yeah.
example. So we go out and we borrow 570 million to modernize these prisons. Now we are paying money, right? The first year, again, we're talking about 2023, 2024, where our country had about 10.5 trillion in debt, and we ended up spending 1.6 trillion in debt service. So you can see that the interest rate that we are paying on this is disastrous. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we only pay
Yes.
10% interest. So you go out and you take a project. The contract price is 570
Mm-hmm.
million. You're gonna pay 10%, which is 57 million in a year. So, but you go out and the project
Mm.
stalls for 5, 6 years. Do you see the amount of money that you're going to end up losing? And so you look at all this
Yes.
27 billion that we are having here may end up costing us 54, 56, 60 billion, who knows? Because again, every year you're paying interest on the money that you took. Then you go
Yes.
out, you have this project. If the project is worth taking on in the begin to start with, that means that when we are not executing, when we are not completing that project, there's someone who's not getting served. If you go and decide that we need to take money to build a hospital and build that hospital somewhere or a cancer treatment center, and you go out and you issue a contract, and
Mm.
then the project starts for 10 years, there's someone who's not getting the benefit of this service, which is what necessitated this entire project. And so when you're talking about a country
Yes.
that's spending most of its revenue on debt service, and then you go and look at all these departments and you find that we are losing, we have parked 27 billion in money that is not serving anybody. It's disastrous,
Mm.
and again, I look at these
Yes.
as someone who comes from the private sector. None of these things that we're talking about here will be able to.
Mm.
Nobody is going to be able to survive this. I mean, if you showed up for a review of your performance, and one of the things that comes up is that you have
Mm.
initiated contracts worth 27 billion, and you don't know where they're not proceeding. You don't know why nobody's, they're not getting completed. How can you expect to keep your job? And so,
Mm.
if this cannot happen in the private sector, why is it that we have different standards
Yeah.
for people in government? That's what bugs me all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is disastrous. And
Quite.
again, yeah,
It's
just think
quite.
about the interest. Think about the interest that we are bearing on these projects, and then think about the fact that it's not 1 year. Again, I'm seeing here 27 billion. So you take 27 billion, and we don't finish those projects, and the first year goes. Assume a 10% interest rate, which is very, very, conservative. We've lost 2.7 billion in 1 year. The next
Yes.
year, nothing happens, we lose another 2.7 billion. By the time you're done, if you're looking at a 10-year period, we could double the amount of money that we actually borrowed.
And now that you've just mentioned interest,
Hmm.
we are focusing on this interest that we are paying to subcontractors, but we are
Yes.
not focusing on the interest that we are paying on the loans that we are taking, because most of our expenditure
Yeah.
and most of these projects that we are taking on is
Yeah.
financed by loans. So actually, ultimately, if we add up
Right.
what you are paying in terms of lost money's
Yeah.
interest, really, it's
Right.
and income. Do you know, when I was looking at this, I was just like, but this is not normal. This is not how a rational
Yeah.
adult should be acting. There is no way you're
Yeah.
going to lose money,
Right.
excessive money, through the
Right.
person who is providing banking services to you.
Right.
There is
Right.
no way you're going to lose money through subcontractor. There is no way you're going to lose money. The loan you've taken, you're losing money at that point of taking.
Right.
Then when they're executing the contract, because you failed one or two things, you're losing. Like, really, it is not normal. It does not
Yeah.
make sense.
I agree with you. I mean, there's nothing normal here.
It's
Like
all
I
right.
said, you and I function in the private sector where none of this stuff is going to. Nobody can survive this. I mean, if you showed up in a performance interview and there is 27 billion
Yes.
in stalled projects
Mm.
where shareholders have put capital into a business, and you've started projects that have gone on for 10 years and they're not getting completed, and we are not earning any income on the like,
Yes.
you are never going to be able to survive this. But somehow in government,
Yeah.
seems to not have any repercussions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
I
I agree with
totally
you.
agree with you. And now we got to go on.
No, I'm sorry. I was just I was agreeing with you in terms of the chain. The chain, the repercussions here is not just the fact that we are paying interest when we don't for example, many of these projects where we delay, they stop because of I've seen cases where, for example, we
Mm,
go out and we issue a contract to someone and we need to do some things to make sure that the contract can start, right? For example, if it's a road project and we need to buy land, we need to go and compensate people that maybe had businesses that are going to be
yes.
impacted. But because of incompetence, none of this happens before we sign the
Mm,
contract. I mean, part of competent leadership is to make sure that by the
yes.
time we sign the contract, there are no delays that are going to happen that cost us money, right? So people that are smart about responsibility of government. They're going to make sure that before we sign a contract with a contract, they can start tomorrow. But that doesn't happen, right? So, we are losing a lot of money because people that are supposed to be smart about their conduct, how they conduct themselves, when it comes to executing on some of these government
Yes.
functions, they're just not, they don't take them seriously,
And now that you're just mentioning that about
right?
procurement of land,
Yeah,
recently there is this Me Mouse Summit road that has been
yeah,
launched. And
right.
what was going through my head amongst other, I'm like, have they procured the land that they're going to use for expansion? Now that we are talking about this,
Yeah,
chances are the land that is going to for the expansion of that road has not been procured. But here we are, they're saying part of the contracts are. Here's the thing. Let's just even dig on that a bit.
right.
Part of they are negotiating the contracts with part of the some of the bidders as of now. And
Yeah,
then they're saying it is open for more bidders to come in. That part I do not
yeah,
get. But then the other thing that now I'm thinking about clearly, because they're putting those trucks that are supposed to excavate and do stuff on the road,
right. Yeah,
did they procure all the parcels of land we need so that we do not get to a point where
right,
there's going to be a contract variation because
right.
the land parcels have not been procured? We can't continue like that.
Yeah. So what happens when you have, I mean, I'm reminded of this really ridiculous comparison of Kenya and Singapore, where we say that we want to be Singapore, but we don't do anything that puts us on that path to being Singapore. If you look at how Singapore became Singapore,
Yes.
one of the things they did is long-term planning. Like, they really, when you look at the people that were responsible for
Yeah.
developing Singapore, right? They were people that looked at the long-term, um, you know, needs of the country. They put money where it needed to go, where they needed to invest resources. They didn't do things just because it sounded good.
Yes.
When you look at what's happening in this country, in
Yes.
my view, the one thing that becomes that you're going to notice often is that we are doing things, it's a knee-jerk thing. The president goes somewhere and he knows that questions are going to come up about, they have not done anything for that
Yes.
region. So he goes in and announces something, like this particular road that we're talking about, in my view. I am from Kiambu County. I'm telling you, spending a lot of time. I was in Ironi today, right? So I spent a lot of time going around there, driving, talking to people. And I know for sure that part of the reason why the president doing this is he's trying to send a message to people in Mount Kenya, people in Kiambu County, that I am for this country, right? But so you end up doing things without planning. You end up doing things without a plan. You end up doing things without making sure that you have done everything that you need to do as government to make sure that you don't jeopardize the project and you don't put resources in
Exactly.
jeopardy, right?
Yes.
And so you look at this government and almost everything that it does, they go out and they decide that they want to do affordable housing, right? No planning. They just do it, and then all of a sudden they start running into issues in court. It becomes invalidated. Things like everything that this government does, they want to do. They say they want to do healthcare. No, they don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to get any market assessment in terms of what we need as a country, in terms of capabilities, in terms of
Yes.
healthcare. They don't want to ask what the fair market price is. They do things, and then all of a sudden they start getting in trouble. So when I look at, projects that we're
Yes.
talking about, for example, if you go out and you launch a billion shilling or 20 billion project and there was no planning and you didn't make sure that you covered all your bases, what you're gonna find out is you start running into issues, right? So you end up with billions of money. Again, this 27 billion that we're talking about is not the amount of store projects for the entire government. It's a subset. It's a subset, right? It's a small subset. I want to make sure that people understand that this 27 billion is a fraction of the issues that we have in government. We're just giving you a couple of examples of what we have today.
Yeah. Okay, Bonnie, we got to our last issue.
Hmm.
And just to show how relatable it is, I'm going to give a short story of mine. Um, about 2 years ago, I bidded for a construction project in Nakuru.
Hmm.
And fortunately, I got it. And I was so excited that I had gotten that project. And we did the works actually, we finished the works in 2 months
Right.
because it was construction. Okay, let me not say what that was. But
Yeah.
anyway, we did the construction in 2 months.
Hmm.
And then, of course, payment, and it was nearing the end of the financial year. So you will
Right.
presume because it's near the end of the financial year, they
Hmm.
ought to pay us before the end of the financial year so that whatever budget they get, I think that should be for the subsequent financial year.
Hmm.
Tell you what, that payment, I received it, part of it, I received it this year,
Hmm.
sometime mid of this year, if not
Yep.
later this year.
Hmm.
And that was just the payment. And the remainder of the amount, I think Nico 2 vibes, inshallah, whenever
Yeah.
it's gonna come. And I will say I am not the only person. I believe there are many people who are going through that.
Right.
And based on recent statistics, the amount that is being owed by, I think this is a combination of the national and the county government,
Right.
runs to more a trillion right now. And when you
Yeah.
look at the auditors' report, they claim part of the reason is because there is delay in disbursement of funds from the national government
Hmm.
and all these other reasons. But what I
Yeah.
fail to understand is how you're going to get into a procurement when you do not have the money, because
Yeah.
based on the law, you are supposed to set aside the funds that you're going to need.
Hmm.
And then that is when you have to have a budget allocation. And then
Yeah.
that is when you can start the procurement process. So first, they're impacting the public by
Hmm.
holding the funds,
Yeah.
because some of us small scale, like that's all the money we have. And
Yeah.
that is the money we've put into this project. And then
Yeah.
now you're not going to pay us. Some of us, we've taken a loan for us to
Hmm.
be able to actually construct that project. And then you're not
Right.
paying us back. So we have to pay the interest for the loan. And in addition to that, we are not receiving money.
Yeah.
It's very burdening on the public. It is burdening on the public.
Yeah.
So just picking a few examples,
Right.
because when I was doing the review of the report,
Hmm.
normally, like I told you, normally I would use the keywords to
Right.
find the areas that I want to focus on.
Right.
When I typed pending bills,
Hmm.
it was too many to say I am focusing on this area or this other area. That
Yeah.
speaks to how much money is being owed by the national government
Right.
towards various people, the public.
Yeah.
So please talk through this, highlighting a few major
Yeah.
examples so that the public can understand how bad this is.
Yeah, so I mean, so the issue of pending bills to me is an embarrassment. I mean, it's just the height of irresponsibility and just incompetence. I mean, if you go out and you give someone a contract and they perform pursuant to their obligations under the contract, they send you an invoice and you don't pay and you end up getting hit with billions and billions of interest.
Yes.
I don't know how else to describe that as, other than it's just, I don't know, dumb, incompetent. The only problem is that it has real consequences. We're talking about a country that's spending 75% of revenue on debt service, and then you go on to lose billions and billions and billions of in interest.
Yes.
over and above that amount that we spend in debt service. And this is why, Kenyans hear that we are spending 3.8 billion, we're spending 4.3 billion. And you look around and you ask, where does the money go? Where does the money go? Which is what the question that we're trying to answer here, right? Um, so when you hear that in 2023, 2024, we spent 3.8 trillion, you hear that out of that number was 1.6 billion that we spent on debt service. And then you start going down each department and looking at what happened to the money, right? We started by talking about, the amount of money that we spent on interest on, on bills that have been sent to us, but we don't pay, right? Um,
Yes.
and so we are talking about now the actual pending bills that are sitting out there that have not been paid. I'm looking at just the subset of you know um, departments that we're talking about here,
Mm.
53 billion in bills that have been sent out. We have not
Yes.
disputed, but we have not paid. So chances are they are going to accumulate interest, right? Because
Yes.
oftentimes, as you know, these contracts say if we send you an invoice and you don't pay by a certain amount of time, we are going to hit
Yes.
you with interest. But I want
Yes.
Kenyans to think about the entire chain of events that take place. When you give your example of you performing a contract on your
Mm.
contract, nobody's disputing what you've done.
Yes.
And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to thrive. You're trying to make sure that you succeed in the marketplace. You go out, you hire people, you're taking a chance. You go out, maybe you go to a bank and you borrow money and you're having to pay interest.
Mm.
You buy equipment or you
Mm.
lease equipment because you need to be able to execute on the contract. So I'm talking about all the things that you have to put into place. You go out and
Yes.
some people use their own money.
Yes.
If you ever run a business, you do a lot to be able to even put yourself in a position to execute on a contract. And some of these contracts are not high margins, right? So
Yes.
you go out and you do all those things. And then when you've done what you need to do and you send an invoice, you don't get paid.
Yes.
And so, I want Kenyans to think about this in terms of, you're hearing every day politicians tell you that
Mm.
we just need 4.5 trillion to be able to become Singapore. And
Yes.
yet we don't have the ability or the competence to manage bills, to pay bills that have been sent to us that we are not disputing. So just in this particular example here, I'm looking at 53 billion. This is not the entire government. This is a
No.
subset of the departments that we've looked at. And we see here
Yes.
53 billions that have been sent to us and we have not paid. Oftentimes these invoices are accumulating interest. And again,
Mm.
I want you to think about the entire chain. If someone went out there and got a contract to build a road, they went out there, they got equipment, they had to pay for that equipment.
Mm.
They went out there and they spent time. They hired people, right? They sent those people out to do work. They got
Yes.
paid. So
Mm.
if you're an entrepreneur and you're just struggling to just stay afloat,
Yes.
in your example, you went out, you provided services, right? Some people are not just providing services. If you're building a road, you're having to buy materials. You're having to
Yes.
either buy equipment or lease equipment. So
Mm.
when you go out and you do all this and then you don't get paid on time,
Yes.
that's why you see a lot of businesses collapsing, right? When you talk
Yeah.
to people, when you talk to
That
business
is.
people. Yeah. So this week I had lunch with two people.
Mm.
One of them was an old friend who's an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And the other one was a cousin of mine who is in construction, just like you are. You
Mm.
were when you did that contract.
Mm.
And it was interesting because we're having lunch together with these two gentlemen.
Mm.
And I asked them if they ever done business with government, and if they did, what was the experience?
Mm.
My old friend my old friend said, I have never ever done business with government because I never
Mm.
hear anything good,
Apart.
from them. So
Mm.
I don't want to do business with government. My
Yes.
cousin said that he's done 3 contracts with the government, and it was his worst experience. Right.
Mm.
So now
Mm.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and you're telling me pretty much the same thing,
Mm.
which is not what people think when they think about government. When you spend time looking at all these things and you hear about corruption, particularly when it comes to some of these deals where building roads and stuff like that, people think
Yes.
that the people that are doing business with government are always winning. They're always sort
Yes.
of getting more than they're supposed to. But you're giving an
Yes.
example, and my cousin gave me an example of what often happens, you do get business with government. It is because of corruption, and oftentimes maybe some of these people are trying to frustrate you so that you show up with with an offer to maybe share some of the proceeds.
Yes.
I have heard of a case where someone was talking about a legal firm that has a lot of invoices sent out to the county, and I believe it was the county of Nairobi. And what the gentleman was talking about was the fact that you expected to approach those in leadership and offer them something so that they